These days, almost every new game features DLSS resolution upscaling and frame generation technologies that boost performance and image fluidity respectively. These advancements are blurring the lines between high-end graphics cards like the RTX 4080 Super and mainstream options like the 4060 Ti. Is it truly worth spending more than double the price for the 4080 Super to enjoy the latest games on a 4K screen? Let's find out. When using a 32-inch 4K display, I can't tell the difference between native resolution and DLSS quality. DLSS balanced looks almost as good as quality. It is only with DLSS performance that I start to notice a meaningful reduction in image quality, but even then it is still quite good and the overall experience is enjoyable. As a test platform, I'm using my i7-14700K FPC build powered by MSI, paired with the MSI G321CU 4K 144Hz monitor. If you're interested in any of the products featured in this video, you can get them on Amazon at the links in the description below. Let's start with the 4080 Super in Hellblade 2. One of the most graphically demanding games in 2024. Let's use the highest graphics quality preset, which includes ray tracing, and I'm thinking that we should use DLSS resolution upscaling set to balanced. If the game will run too smooth, then we'll bump it up to quality. But I have a feeling that in worst case scenarios, we will need that DLSS balanced. Because even though that in this location here, which represents your average scene in this game, we are getting close to 90 FPS, well above 80. However, as soon as we get closer to this forest, take a look at what happens. FPS starts dropping. We are at 73, 75 right now, and now we are going to enter the forest, where FPS drops by a lot every time. And as you can see, even on DLSS balanced, we're getting 50 plus FPS. This is fine, but we should be expecting 60 plus FPS in any scenario, right? And from here we have two options. Either lower DLSS resolution upscaling quality further, or use frame generation. Honestly, I think that we should preserve the image quality because we are using a high-end GPU. So let's try something else. Let's try DLSS quality and frame generation enabled. This is absolutely fine. Take a look at this. We are getting above 70 FPS and controls feel fine. They don't feel sluggish at all. I think that this is the way to go if you are running this game using the 4080 Super. The image presented is nice and clear. I like the quality, even when we look at branches. That is fine. Because one of the things about using a more aggressive DLSS resolution upscaling option is that thin objects normally get destroyed. Something like grass or thin branches, you'll just see sizzling as you move your mouse. But with higher quality DLSS options, it doesn't happen, or at least doesn't happen as much. Alan Wake 2 features hardware-based ray tracing, and in this game we have to use DLSS and frame generation from the get-go, even with the 4080 Super, if we want to use that ray tracing. And by the way, the performance difference between using medium ray tracing and high ray tracing is just a couple of FPS, so might as well just go for the best, highest option. Other than that, graphics quality is set to high, DLSS frame generation is enabled because that is necessary. You'll see in a moment why. And I'm using resolution upscaling DLSS set to performance. Yes, you heard me correctly. That is required if you want to play this game at appropriate frame rates. Check this out. Indoors, We're getting close to 90 FPS, so it's all good, all nice. Controls feel nice and sharp, no huge latency here. It's just normal operation. But as soon as we move into another location, like this forest right here, it is one of the worst case scenarios, but this is a huge area and you will be spending a considerable amount of time in this area. So it is important to have good performance even in this location. And that is why frame generation and DLSS set to performance is absolutely necessary, because otherwise you will not be able to get a 60 plus FPS experience in this location. Let's start stripping away those DLSS features. Let's disable frame generation and see what happens. DLSS performance is still enabled. And take a look at this. We are getting below 40 FPS in some of these scenes. That is not great. That's why I am telling you that if you want to use ray tracing in very GPU demanding games, then you will have to use lower DLSS resolution, upscaling qualities, as well as frame generation. We're testing ray tracing capabilities of the 4080 Super because, in my opinion, that is pretty much the only thing that sets it apart from lower tier graphics cards, is better ray tracing performance. I like ray tracing in this game very much, not because of how light feels, but mainly because of the reflections. Yeah, ray-traced reflections look absolutely amazing. Take a look at those reflections in the water. They look very realistic. Now let's disable ray tracing and take a look at what the reflections will be like without it. Have a look at that. It's just some kind of dirty mess. That's not how reflections work in real life. But let's forget about ray tracing and reflections for a moment and check how the 4080 Super performs at native resolution using high quality preset, no ray tracing, no frame generation, no DLSS. And we are getting 50 plus FPS in this location, which means that we'll probably get something like closer to 30 in worst case scenarios. So this is not acceptable. So we must use DLSS even if we don't use ray tracing. Let's try DLSS quality. And this is better. However, if we enter the forest, then we will be getting close to 50 FPS. It still feels okay, but we're aiming for 60 plus FPS, aren't we? And I'm more of a set it and forget it kind of guy, so I don't want to flick around these settings every time I'm going to another location in the game. So let's try DLSS balanced and see if that will be enough to achieve that consistent 60 plus FPS experience. And over here we are getting 57, 58 FPS. But that is fine, I can forgive that, because in other locations we are getting 60 plus FPS in this forest, so it's fine. I can live with it. I think that this is the way to go. If you don't want to use ray tracing, then just set DLSS to balanced and enjoy the game like that. Alternatively, you can select DLSS quality and enable frame generation. And there we go. Now we have a more fluid picture. 80 plus FPS over here, and it does feel nice, I must say. So what I'm noticing with the 4080 Super is that we have a lot of flexibility in terms of graphics settings that we can use. Now let's have a look at the game that doesn't have ray tracing and is not that GPU demanding. This is just your average 2024 AAA title. And of course I'm talking about Horizon Forbidden West. We are using maxed out graphics settings, field of view is set to the absolute maximum, native 4K resolution, no DLSS, no frame generation. And we are getting well above 60 FPS in this location here. that is filled with a lot of stuff and many NPCs. However, in some other locations in the game, I'm talking about base game, I'm not talking about the DLC that is supposedly very GPU demanding. Still, even in the base game, you will see drops closer to 60 FPS, but from my experience, it generally stays above 60 FPS. So if you want to cap it at 60, it's fine, you can do that. This is a perfectly beautiful experience. However, in my opinion, there is no reason not to use at least DLSS quality, because it looks just as good as native resolution. I honestly cannot tell the difference between the two. And take a look at that. It's just free performance. We went from 60 to 70 plus FPS to 90 to 100 even sometimes. This is nice. There is no reason not to use it, because it looks and feels amazing on a 4K screen. I've installed the 4060 Ti into the same PC. It must be noted that this is a 16GB version of the 4060 Ti, so in terms of video memory, both the 4080 Super as well as the 4060 Ti have 16GB of memory. Let's start our 4060 Ti testing with Horizon Forbidden West. Just a reminder, with the 4080 Super, we were able to achieve 60 plus FPS experience using native resolution in this game. And with the 4060 Ti, we are still using the same graphics settings, and we are already on DLSS quality, and it's not enough. We're getting 40 plus FPS, so we must lower that DLSS quality. Let's try balanced. It's better. However, we're still not quite there just yet. So we will have to use DLSS performance, which is basically 1080p upscaled to 4K. And even then, we still can't quite get to that 60 plus FPS experience. So we must try something else. How about frame generation? Let's enable that, because we do have a lot of video memory to work with. Frame generation requires extra VRAM, but this card has 16GB, so it's fine. And now the image is nice and fluid. We're getting close to 60 FPS, which means that it will drop in more graphically demanding scenes below 60, but not by much. We will still stay above 50. And honestly, this is a perfectly good experience. Check this out. We're just playing, enjoying the game. This looks very nice on a 4K screen. Obviously, controls don't feel as responsive as they did with the 4080 Super, because we are using frame generation and our base FPS is a little bit lower than 60, so I can feel that in my mouse movements, but it's still good. And I should remind you that we are using the highest graphics quality. If we choose high graphics preset instead of maxing out all of these options, then let's see what will happen. Well, not much actually, because high and very high presets are very much alike in this game. So we got a couple of FPS, but not much, not much. I mean, is it really worth enabling high preset instead of maxing out graphics? I'm not sure that it is worth it. I'd probably try to stick with maxed out graphics for as long as I can. If you do run into any issues later on, then just drop that graphics setting. Otherwise, just keep it on very high. Obviously, image quality is a bit lower than we've had with the 4080 Super, because we are using DLSS performance, but honestly, you can see that only when you compare the two side by side. As I'm looking at the screen right now, it looks absolutely marvelous. I'm enjoying these visuals on a 4K screen. This is a great experience. Now let's see how the 4060 Ti behaves in Hellblade 2. I wonder, will we be able to keep using the highest graphics quality preset if we choose to use resolution upscaling, performance, and frame generation? And this is looking promising. 70 plus FPS in this location right here. Yeah, we might be able to get away with using the highest graphics quality preset. And one thing that is very different about the 4060 Ti compared to the 4080 Super is that GPU power draw. We are using around 160 watts with the 4060 Ti. With the 4080 Super, it's usually somewhere in between like 270 to 290 watts. And if you live in a house without air conditioning, during the summer, using that 4080 Super might become a problem. I just don't want to use it as much because take a look at that. That's 27.6 degrees right now in my room. That's almost 82 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. It's very hot, and it will only get hotter if I would have kept using that 4080 Super to play games. But with the 4060 Ti, it is less of a problem, although it is still a problem, and normally I just wouldn't enjoy my games during the day while the temperature is that high. And I'm living in the UK, but we are getting some very hot days right now. It will get cooler later on, so I'll just enjoy my games later. And take a look at this. We're getting 47, 48 FPS. It's obviously it's not as nice as 60, but this will only happen in worst case scenarios. So you could say that it is bearable, but I think there's still something that can be done here. What I would do is just use medium graphics preset because it looks almost as good as high in this game, and it will make the performance much better. And with that simple change, we are now getting 60 plus FPS, and controls feel absolutely smooth and responsive. This is very nice. Let me just reset that 1% lows and 0.2% lows. Yeah, take a look at this. This is nice. This is a good experience right here. We've had close to 60 FPS experience, even in the worst case scenario. And that makes me happy with the 4060 Ti. Let's have a look at Alan Wake 2 now. Just out of curiosity, let's select Performance DLSS, Frame Generation Enabled, and let's select Medium Ray Tracing. Oh my! Even with frame generation, we're getting below 30 FPS and controls feel very sluggish. I mean, I move the mouse and then there's a huge delay between my action and what I see on the screen. So it is safe to say that we should not be using ray tracing with the 4060 Ti. So let's turn that off and keep graphics preset on high, frame generation on, resolution upscaling on performance. And in the worst case scenario, we're getting 45 FPS. Controls are sluggish. They're not absolutely horrendous, but sluggish. I don't feel like this is a particularly great experience, but I can't really say that it is terrible either. I could play like this, because majority of the time in this game you will be spending in other areas, like this one here, that is less GPU demanding, and we're getting close to 60 FPS here, and controls feel fine. So, this is perfectly good experience, and I am enjoying it. Bear in mind that this is one of the most GPU demanding games. And of course, we can always lower that graphics quality. Let's select medium. I don't feel like the performance got particularly better. Yeah, maybe a little bit strange. But what I'm interested in is those wires. Yeah, I can see that they're sizzling a little bit. They're falling apart as I pan my camera. So if you focus on them, then you will notice it. Using higher DLSS qualities does fix that issue, but not completely. You will still see those visual imperfections. And while this experience is acceptable, I can't really say that it is particularly great. I definitely would like just a little bit more performance out of the GPU. But in terms of visual quality, it is fine. If you choose to use these settings on a 4K screen, then you'll still be able to enjoy the game. In conclusion, did I like the 4060 Ti experience on a 4K monitor? Yeah, it was fine. The main difference between these two graphics cards is that the 4080 Super can actually run ray tracing in games, although it still needs help of resolution upscaling as well as frame generation to do that on a 4K display. Furthermore, with the 4060 Ti, we had to use lower resolution upscaling quality. We were pretty much all the time on DLSS performance. While using the 4080 Super, we could get away with running Horizon Forbidden West at native resolution, no DLSS at all. And obviously, overall experience with the 4080 Super was superior. However, was it really bad with the 4060 Ti? Not really. I still enjoyed my games, and we had a pretty smooth experience overall. The only thing is that you have to tweak some settings here and there, and the 4060 Ti heavily relies on DLSS frame generation as well as resolution upscaling, especially in the most GPU demanding games such as Hellblade 2 and Alan Wake 2. And obviously, the image quality was much better on the 4080 Super as a result, because we didn't have to use such an aggressive resolution upscaling. But would I recommend it for 4K gaming? Not really, because there are other options that are more suitable, like the 4070 Super or the 4070 Ti Super. With either one of these graphics cards, you will not have to make that many sacrifices in terms of visual quality. Personally, I'm using the 4070 Super to play my games on a 4K screen using my personal PC. So, are the high-end GPUs dumb? No, they have their place. But what I've learned after experiencing all of these GPUs is that you can absolutely enjoy your games using a lower tier graphics card. It's not gonna be an issue. And it could be as low as the 4060 Ti 16GB version. Just don't get the 8GB version of the 4060 Ti, because it is not enough to play your games using frame generation. Frame generation requires extra VRAM to run that feature, and even some games are not running well on an 8GB card at 1080p nowadays, without frame generation at all. So get yourself a card with more memory, at least 12GB, like the 4070 Super. If you're interested in any of the products featured in this video, you can get them on Amazon at the links in the description below. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this topic? And don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Also, subscribe for more content like this if you haven't already. It was I, Vadim. Until next time.